All righty, everybody. We are live with class today. Go ahead, Sam.
Hey, awesome to be here. It is a day of answering questions, and I think we're going to see where we go. It's a big day. It's a big day in so many different ways. Oh my gosh. We have, I'm here obviously from home in the basement. And just to kind of give you a sense of things, show a couple different camera angles. And we are, because I'm at home, I was able to coerce. I asked very kindly if the doctor of dialogue would show up and just be here as part of the conversation. And she agreed. And so we are down. Welcome to class, Lori.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Listen, it's great to have you on this day, this momentous day.
Very historic day.
Do you have just anything quick you want to say, or?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a day for quick things. I think it's for more thoughtful, complex kinds of rumination.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think what we're going to do is, I asked Lori. I told her, hey, why don't you just come and sit down on a microphone, put some headphones on, and we'll just see what comes up in the chat and see how things go. And if there's something that's really would be nice for you to respond to, then I think I'll pull you in.
And maybe should I say one thing,
Mhm.
or could I say one thing?
Mhm.
I think if I were watching, I would say, why is your wife in this conversation? And I would just want to add that the work that I do is squarely in the zone of conflict, combat, and conformity. Really, I'd like to call it, and do call it. And I think that what we're in the middle of with I think we see combat and conformity right now in the most profound ways. And so, even though my particular focus isn't on electoral politics, I think the way in which humans are lining themselves up and have had to line themselves up in the middle of this particular election, but a lot of issues, is just very much the kinds of thing that I'm paying attention to all the time. So,
and I should add, you are the director of the World and Conversation Center for Public Diplomacy.
mhm,
So you've been in this work for a long, long time.
yes.
All right. Well, I have a couple of things that I think are worth jumping into just as a starting point. But what I want to say to the class is that I want to answer questions today. And so if you've got, when you have some questions, put them in the chat, and Jeff or somebody will feed them to me. And if you want to come onto the stream and ask your question, you can do that as well. So that will be fine. Just stream at social19.org. Send your email and we'll send you the link. Send it to Joy. But I really want to respond to questions that are in the chat, because it just feels like this is the best way to move forward today. It's kind of I don't know, it's a momentous day. It's a huge day. I mean, it really is. And so
Can you say,
Mhm.
can you say, when you say from your perspective that it's a momentous day, can you say what you mean? Because lots of people are saying that, and they have different reasons for saying that, or maybe no reason for saying it because they just keep hearing it. So what do you mean, from where you stand and what you've studied and learned, and the amount of time you've lived on the planet and as a citizen of this particular country?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, you probably know, well, you do know better than anybody. I'm not an extremist thinker. I'm fairly moderate in the way that I think about things. That I am very often not saying that the sky is falling and everything's going to fall apart. I'm the person in our, when we talk, I'm the person who's always, not just you and I, but when you see me having conversations with other people, I'm the person who's saying, listen, it's fine. The world's not going to hell in a handbasket kind of thing. It's like, relax, we'll be okay. Right.
Mhm.
You would agree. I'm like that.
Yes.
What I see now, however, is I think there's a division that certainly I've never experienced in my lifetime. It's a division that is not only is it deep, the crevices are very deep, but they're not going to go away. I think that we've seen in the past 4 years, but certainly, I mean, it's been building for quite a number of years. But I think we have a lot of folks who are in positions of power now that have been really just digging deeper and deeper and deeper, digging the crevice deeper, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how to say it. But and in a way that I'm not sure that we'll be able to return to. And I study war and I study conflict as you do, right? You study it more, you study it more interpersonally, and I study it more
internationally
in the geopolitical sense. And I study how societies break down, how it happens sociologically, politically, economically, et cetera. And what I'm witnessing here in the United States, it very much has the seeds for breakdown. And we need to pull back from the edge. I think people we keep, with the hysteria, the extreme thinking and the arguments, the way we have kind of caricaturized. How do you say that? Characterize the other side, the enemy, and so on. And we've done it in such extreme ways that it just makes it almost impossible then to turn around and say, yeah, I know I was saying all that stuff about you, but come on, I didn't. It's not really what I mean. Or no, okay, we can be friends now, that sort of thing. And I think that, but we've not, and we brought the populace in a way. And so, I think people don't really understand it. I was at the Senate one day, at Senate chambers, and I watched a vote. And so it was really interesting, to be honest, because there weren't many people in the audience at all. It wasn't a big vote, but it was a vote for the full Senate. So, 96 people, I think, were in attendance. And I watched people in the Senate, this was about 8 years ago, and I watched people in the Senate who were saying really nasty and kind of mean things about one another in the news, publicly, come together and laugh and joke and shake hands and do the kind of the bro and sis hug and kind of thing, and because they generally get a sense that they are people who are working together. They might be on different sides of the aisle, different political parties and so on, but they're working together to build something. And it's the nature of politics, right? You say a lot of things about people that you wouldn't ordinarily say. And so that's just part of the way things operate, that's and I witnessed it firsthand, but we're in a different position now. They've raised this, they turned the fire up and they've raised the stakes, and we have people calling for people to go out in the streets with guns and violence and protecting things.
But I think though this is when you're talking at the level of a nation, it's massive, right? And I think that there's almost nothing that you can say that either hasn't been and isn't being said, or that actually couldn't the opposite be said in the next sentence, because there's so many places to look at what's happening. And I think that the only thing that I think is I can say, or maybe some of us can say who have lived through many presidential elections, is that the us and themness and the vitriol and that the level of objectifying the other isn't really the key feature of what's happening. There's systemic pieces that are moving and that we actually are not being able to trust in the way that we used to, that I think are the things that are making this historic in the sense of, will there be a peaceful transition of power, right? Things that we maybe as Americans, or maybe as people that don't think about these things too deeply, I'm not sure, haven't had to question, right? Well, and so what I'm saying, I don't know that we have to name all of those particular things, but I think that for those of us who have either studied it or lived long enough, we haven't seen those kinds of features before. And so while I think it's really important to talk about the division between people and even the division politically, and actually we do need to talk about that, because I think that actually is where we have power, we as humans.
Right.
I don't think those are the key features of what's making this as dangerous as some say, as it seems to some of us.
Yeah, well, so the piece is, though, that it's like the bottom has dropped out, right? There's a certain sense of a trust. Well, first off, listen, when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, meaning the head of the military in the United States, feels compelled to come out and say the military is not going to get involved in these elections. The head of the Supreme Court, same thing. This is the kind of stuff that happens in nations that regularly experience coups d'états, right? This is the kind of thing. These are the kinds of statements, the ways in which people come through, they walk through, and the kinds of things that happen, right? The military has to step up and they have to enter the fracas in the fray, or they don't. But this is not part of the United States, right? When we're here trying to find the different sides, but it's more one side than the other, just because of the nature of things. But trying to not count votes, trying to ensure that certain people's votes are not counted. That happens in places like South Sudan and Democratic Republic of Congo, I don't know, Afghanistan. I mean, these are the places that are in certain countries in South America, right? I mean, that doesn't happen here.
Or it's right? At least it's how Americans have viewed those situations in other places.
Well, we've actually have helped in Haiti. We've helped foment, actions in those nations to ensure that sort of thing happens. The votes are not counted. The democratic elections don't happen.
But wait. That's you're mixing things, right? So I'm not talking about the government and like our national positions in relationship to making things happen or not happen in other places. I'm just saying, as American citizens, I would say that the vast majority of American citizens have not seen those as concerns that we have had to have for our elections, regardless of whether it's true or not, or whether there's corruption. It's just that it's a mentality that has come that has been the sort of an American mentality that is not so true at this point in this election.
Okay, well let me just show a couple things. Let me show a couple slides here first off that I think will help in some ways, and then I want to get some questions from the stream for sure. Hey Jeff, can you put up? I want to put those 3 slides up, and I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to see them to know if they actually get up or not. So someone's going to have to. Okay. So I want to put that, the first one is this is a precinct or a county, the county outcomes, county by county votes in the 2008 election. And, red is Republican and blue is Democrat. And is that up? Yeah. Okay. So what you see here, so this is the 2008 election. This is the election with Obama and McCain, and you just see what it looks like. It's very red, right? It's extremely red. And then let's look at the next one is 2012. So this is Hillary. No, this is Obama and Romney. And notice the shift between the first one and the second one. Not much changed. Now let's look at this next election, which is Hillary Clinton and Trump. This is 2016, and look at the difference between 2012, 2016. And what you see here is that people are voting. They voted for Trump fundamentally on the basis of party, and people vote for their party, their political party. And most people don't know much about the candidates at all. So and it takes a lot to really understand something about the candidates. And so, what happens is, people just resort back to basically their parties. And what I think is going to happen in this election is that people are going to vote primarily on the basis of their parties once again. And it's just a matter of how many people of your party, either your Democratic Party or Republican Party, can you get out to vote. But fundamentally, people don't start at zero and weigh the differences between, in this particular case, between these two candidates, right, Biden and Trump. But that's not what happens. People are going to primarily, the vast majority of Americans are going to vote on the basis of their party, just like they did in the last 3 elections. And what that tells me is that people will say, oh my God, we brought this guy Trump on who has all these crazy ideas. This is what people said in 2016. And like, oh my God, he was, misogynistic and, all this negative stuff, right? But fundamentally, but how could people vote for him? Well, people would vote for him because they vote for their party. They don't vote for the candidate. And I think that is largely going to be true now. And so it's just a matter of, can these parties, get people out to vote, right? And it's maybe a slightly different in this case, but what that tells me is that, first off, I'm not sure if that soothes me or makes me, lose more hair. But, the fact that people are not thinking about the consequences of things, and mostly they don't think, right? Which is partly why I think this system is really the way in which voting operates in the system is probably not it's not a very ideal way to vote.
I also think that I understand what you're saying about people. They vote for their parties. They don't just start with the candidates at zero and then build from there based on what they hear. I also think that it's important to just say there are 2 choices. That's it.
Yeah.
For all the complexities of the issues and all of the bad blood, really, that gets traded between people who are on, quote, one side or the other. When you only have one side or the other, it doesn't leave any room for nuance. There is no nuance, right? There is no complexity. It's one or the other. And that's not a apology for anything other than, like, really, what are the people, so to speak, expected to do? It's a very simplistic choice. And and I just think that if we cannot stop thinking, we cannot forget that we only have one or the other.
And we only truthfully have the ability to have a very surface level comprehension of the issues.
It could be as deep as you could be a historian. No. Yeah. This is the important point that I'm making. It's like we have to stop only putting this on the American people or their limited whatever, or the fact that they're only voting for their parties or what. You have 2 choices. That's it. You could have been a historian of presidential elections. You don't have any more choices than anybody else. That's it. So you're forced into one or the other, and that's not much. And that doesn't give any room for greater understanding of things or more nuanced ideas. It's so somehow that's the simplest idea, but it feels really important to me.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, it's not about agreeing. It's just
but it is very bizarre.
Well, we said earlier, Pepsi Coke.
Yeah,
it's that. That's what we're talking about.
Although in this case, I will say that I think I don't want to say much about it, but it's not really in this particular case Pepsi Coke.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not actually equating the candidates. In that way, I'm saying how, when your whole world comes down to one or the other.
Yeah,
it's limited, to say the least.
Hey, Jeff, I want to show that next slide. This is a slide I have showing who people in other countries would vote for. And once again, Lori Lynn, this is really fascinating. So that, they asked folks and key countries around the world who they would vote for in this election if they could vote. And when you look at this slide, you just see it's heavily skewed toward Biden. I mean, there's only 2 countries. There's one country that would choose Trump over Biden, and not by a lot, and that's Russia. And then there's another country that for whom it's even, and it's an even split, and that's Poland. It's 27% would choose Trump and 27% would choose Biden. But every other country is skewing that's on the list, and these are sort of the major countries in the world, would choose Biden, hands down over Trump. And I think it goes, and maybe you could say something about this as well. But I'm being contacted. You and I, we're very connected to people around the world, right? Mm-hmm. We have a lot of colleagues who are working around the world, and with whom we work all over the place. And I think of how many people are reaching out to me right now. How many people are following this election? This is not just about the United States. This is really about the rest of the world. Like, we're watching, we're holding our breath, we're trying to, pay attention to what's happening. But people are really, really concerned about this. And so that also is what's different about this particular election. Mm-hmm. I've never experienced this. I've never seen this. These are people all over the political spectrum, by the way. These aren't just liberals or just conservatives or just, people who like the U.S., don't like the U.S. These are people all over the spectrum who have very complex ideas, about life and about the world. And so reaching out to say, we are watching, we are paying attention. Mm-hmm. And now, mind you, people around the world are more likely to pay attention to U.S. politics than we are to pay attention to politics anywhere else, except maybe the U.K. But even then, I don't, so I thought I would just put that up.
What do you think is important about that? What do you take from that?
What I take from it is just how the rest of the world is seeing, how so many people in the world are seeing. Now, mind you, I don't necessarily think they get it right. It's just data. I'm just reporting the data that people are saying, listen, as things go, y'all have walked us on the precipice, on the edge of something big. I don't know what it is. We're going to go with Biden. Maybe we'll just go with the instability that we've known for a long time, for many, many years, for decades, as opposed to the instability that we feel like comes with this other candidate.
Can I just,
which may or may not be a good thing.
This isn't why I'm here. I don't think, but I also, well, maybe it is, because I want to play devil's advocate, which is really just kind of walking around something, and trying to see what it is. But I don't necessarily, that's one interpretation, but I also think, I'd like to say that President Trump is brilliant at getting attention, right? Brilliant. And so he, in the role of course, the United States president has attention, right? But at a level that is perhaps maybe not seen before, and he does it with controversy. Controversy is what gives him his attention. And I'm not saying he does that consciously or makes a choice about it, but it's what he does. And so because a whole bunch of people are having opinions about whether he gets reelected around the world, it could also just be a testimony to the fact that his controversy makes people stand up and have an opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so, I think we're in the middle. Yeah. This is the thing, like, we're in the middle of something. You can't really have a perspective on its meaning until you can look back on it. And so, social 19 students, for example, in 10 years or 20 years, when you're thinking about another election, you'll have a perspective that's much more accurate about this moment in history than we have now. I think, like what you're saying, we're reporting the data.
You asked me. I didn't even. When I looked at those data, I actually didn't have much of an opinion about it, other than to say, "Wow, that's really interesting."
Well, sure, but the fact that it's even captured. It has some kind of message, or it signals something. And that's why I was asking.
Well, here, let me put something up that you actually would. I think you'll have something to say about this. So, Jeff, if we can put up this next slide it starts with in battleground states in July, and
By the way, I heard, because I was listening to the stream last week, your students were saying, or somehow there was an agreement that they were going to ask questions.
Yeah, they are. I'm going to do
okay.
two. I'm going to do two
All right.
more.
I just
and
want to
then
make
we
sure
need
that,
to-
they're
well,
not
I hope
not that you have answers.
team. I hope
but-
you're collecting questions. So, Lori, what this is? So back in July, in the so-called battleground states, right? I mean, these are the states. Simply means that are up in the air. 35% of 18 to 29-year-old Black adults, African American Black adults, not just African American, Afro-Caribbean, but Black adults say of Trump, okay, agreed with the following. They don't like everything about him, but quote, I don't like everything about him, but I like his strong demeanor and defiance of the establishment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 35, that's a third of Black adults between the age of 18 to 29.
American citizens.
American citizens.
Okay.
That's big. We have, because we live in this, we live in this idea right now that the Trump's only support comes from white people, and Black people, obviously, especially after Black Lives Matter, all the protests emerged in the summertime. Black people obviously hate this guy, and and he's racist and all these things. And people don't realize that there's a lot of support that doesn't necessarily translate into the fact that into them voting for him,
right.
but he will get a fair segment of Black vote in the U.S. So,
which, by the way, I just think it's interesting, just to take it another step, is this gives me faith in humanity in a way. In other words, just to say, oh, I really appreciate this thing, like about this candidate or this human, right? Again, we don't know if those individuals will place their votes, but that doesn't matter. I think pointing to the fact that people can see things outside. That isn't just one dimensional. Right?
This is your work very much. Yeah, but go ahead. Keep going.
Well, no, I think eventually it's either this or that, right? You make a choice, and that. What am I trying to say? The nuance that comes with 35% of the folks in that group saying, well, I kind of like X, Y, or Z about that person. I just think that we have to build on nuance wherever we see it, because we are so fed duality all the time. It's either this or that, Black or white, good or bad, us or them, blah, 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 right? And so to me, I think that's an interesting, but more than interesting, important insight, that people can actually see things in a nuanced way or with complexity, and they do all the time. That's not new information, but it's information that we tend to not want to pay attention to.
And we forget, and you see it all the time in your work, training facilitators.
Well, it's not training facilitators, it's listening to people. I've been listening to people in dialogues for decades. And what you find out really quickly is that there's no one-dimensional human thought, really. Like that everybody is both liberal and conservative, just to use those unfortunate phrases. It's impossible to be one thing.
No, I was going to do a class on this, and I didn't, but that I maybe I will. But the most conservative place in the United States, the most conservative, people used to say the most racist hour of the week is Sunday morning, right?
Or segregated hour.
Segregated hour of the week. Malcolm, I think it was Malcolm X. It might have been MLK, but I think it was Malcolm X said that. But the most conservative place, hour of the week, or it's 2 hours actually, is a Black church on a Sunday morning, right?
Most conservative.
What's that?
Most conservative.
The most conservative space.
How is that?
Well, I don't want to go into it now, but just that when we understand the sociology of conservative thinking, I don't mean politically conservative, not like conservative like AK pseudo Republicans. Republicans are not really very conservative, but most are not. But when we look at what conservative thinking truly is, there's a lot of very conservative thinking in Black churches. Listen, let me show you another slide. Jeff, if you could put the next one up. So that last one was 35% of Black Americans between the age of 18 to 29 say that, they don't like everything about Trump, but they admire his demeanor and his defiance of the establishment. I love that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. In the battleground states in July, this all, by the way, comes from Ipsos, and no, this comes from 538. So this is 538 is a polling organization. So this one is 35% of Hispanic voters under the age of 45 support Trump.
So say it again.
35% of Hispanic voters under the age of 45 support Trump. That's up from 22%, or they did in July. That's up from 22% in 2016. He has increased his support among Hispanic voters, at least in July, by 50%. This is when BLM movement, which Hispanics and Latinos in the United States joined very strongly. This is when it was peaking in July. So increased his support. So mind you, these are younger voters, right? So if we go back to the previous slide with Black voters, 10% of Black voters above the age of 60 support Trump, or would agree with that statement about Trump at all, right? But so it's younger people who are saying that. So here we have 35, so increasing support among Hispanic voters in the United States in the past several months. Like, do you have any, just a quick thought on that?
I wish I did. I was hoping that the sociologist would tell us what your hypothesis
one
is.
thing that it tells me, and again, we think about all the issues of immigration and building the wall and one thing after another. But number one, this also includes Cubans and in Florida. So Florida will probably sway toward Trump and will be largely in the Hispanic. He'll get the majority of the Hispanic vote in Florida, largely because of Cuban Americans, and Cubans tend to be very, very conservative because of the experience with Castro and so on. And so they identify more as Republicans. But I'm struck by this. But once again, it goes with what you're saying about people are not one-dimensional. People actually have really complex ideas, and oftentimes we make them out to be, very, black and white, this and that. But people have complex ways of thinking.
Okay, but let me just, because I know that there will be many people who would hear that, and that would translate into, so complex would translate into thoughtful, educated in a particular way, studied perspectives. And that's not at all what I mean. I just mean, first of all, that humans are intelligent creatures, right? And we actually don't pay attention to all the intelligences that exist within us. But more than that, people just have, our minds are complex. And so whenever you ask somebody a question and you dig, you'll find an idea connected to lots of other ideas. And so all I'm saying is human thinking is complex. It doesn't mean that each person that you talk to has a complex understanding of electoral politics in the United States, but people are not one-dimensional. And as soon as you put an idea in a room, each person will have 10 different things that it makes them think about and that they will imagine and connect to it. That's what I mean when I say complexity. And I just think that it's important to just make the distinction of what I'm saying, but I don't think we pay attention to that enough.
Yeah, and that clearly is what you pay attention to, the ways in which, when you really go beneath the surface, beneath the talking points for people, when you're in a room and you're asking them questions, a mixed room, a multicultural, multiracial room, when you are in that room and you're asking people questions, you are very clear about the levels of complexity that emerge. And we see this in our travels around the world.
It's not that, you don't have to go that far. It's just these minds that we have are very complex. Right. And if you pay attention to your mind and how it works, we all know that. And so what I'm saying is when someone has a thought, it's connected to 15 other beliefs, motivations, experiences, values, etc. And so to think that to talk about people, especially the other, as if they're one-dimensional, as if you can size them up in a sentence or a soundbite, of course we can see trends in people. I mean, that's we understand that. But when we forget the complexity it's very easy to just be, oh, that's a trend, and therefore everyone that fits that is doing this for the same reason. It has the same impact. It has the same source, and it doesn't. And I think to our peril, we come up with these trends that have meaning and importance clearly, but also when it comes to living together and building together and making decisions together, I think it's to our peril that we don't realize that we are complex creatures, no matter who we are.
It's to our peril that we do not recognize that we are complex creatures with complex thoughts.
You can take it to just living in State College, and people who are residents here year round can one-dimensionalize the students that come here and just think of them as, oh, they're here to party. That's it. You might see the trends that would show you, yeah, there's a lot of people that are going to college that enjoy parties, but does that sum up who all of those humans are? And because it fits a trend, and then is that it? Is that all? Is there any reason to actually build bridges and connections and have students and residents be creating together and actually collaborating on what this community could be? Again, to our peril.
Yep. I wanna really say that it's to our peril that we don't recognize how complex we are and how we think. That sounds like a perfect quiz.
What are
question.
you doing? Oh, I was like, what are you doing over there?
All right, listen. Hey, somebody asked a question on the stream. Lots of questions.
Okay.
One is, does Sam regret not voting for Obama, or does he stand by his original stance? Yeah, it's not. No, Obama. I don't.
Wait, what does that question mean to you? I mean, because before you started to quickly answer it. But
well, Obama is. Yeah, I don't. It's not Obama. Maybe the confusion in that question is thinking that I regret not voting for Hillary Clinton in the first Clinton-Trump.
I actually just don't think we know what that question actually means.
Yeah.
So maybe just say how you think. How were you interpreting it originally?
I think it's just not voting for Obama.
Okay.
That's all. It's like, I think, no, I don't regret that. But that has nothing to do with Trump, I don't think. How long, yeah.
Have you talked about that? Is that why that?
Yeah, a little bit. Well, it's important that I, kind of that sense is, that I'm pretty radical. I'm not the center of the road kind of person, right? I'm pretty radical in my thoughts, and so.
But wait, earlier you talked about how moderate you are.
No, I'm moderate. I'm moderate. I'm dude.
Really, this is.
Can you tell the story about? Can you just quickly tell the story about how it is that we're actually living together?
Because when I first met Sam, I was at some point into the beginning of knowing him, I was so tired of the contradictions that he would just constantly contradict himself that I actually had to go and have a conversation with him because I couldn't take it. It was so annoying. But yet, anyway, here we are, how many years later, multiple decades later. And anyway, so yeah, Sam, but what I understand, what I have learned is that the contradictions aren't just purely contradictory, that there's usually something else you're pointing to. So initially you were saying, I'm moderate in the sense that I don't get hysterical about things. I don't just jump off the edge of a cliff when the
sky probably isn't going to be falling.
Yeah, you're very sober in the face of potential crisis or when other people think there's something scary happening. So there's that. But then there's the other side that you were just referring to, which is that you have these, radical, I guess, thoughts, right? You have ideas that some people would define as more radical. Whatever that means, because it's a trope in some way.
Yeah.
So those aren't contradictory. It just, you said them in a contradictory way.
In my life, I have really worked for the support of all other party candidates, non-Republicans, non-Republicrats, anything other, whoever's going to get the most votes is to try to break this break this up a little bit.
Whoever, what does that mean?
Whatever candidate is on the ticket who's going to get the most votes beyond the Republican candidates or the Republican candidates.
So basically, can you speak to people who don't know what you're talking about?
In other words, I think that we need a third, fourth, fifth, and sixth party here.
So you're going to support?
Absolutely, I'm going to support whatever those are. And this party here, the Demopublicans or the Republicrats, it has two names, but it's the same party. I mean, it's a little bit different now because of Trump entering the picture, right? But nonetheless. It's
until this time.
It's a little bit. Yet things have shifted in the past couple of years. I will say I didn't expect. But it is. Yeah, it's a party. It's a system of inequity that's being fueled and
by both. You're saying by the either party has not stood out as like against any of that. They both stand for the same thing.
Yeah.
And so that's why you've always gone toward a third or fourth or whatever candidate.
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. I got questions for you.
Yep, go ahead.
The first one is, what was the first election that you ever participated in?
It was Ronald Reagan, 1980. Yeah.
And who did you vote for?
I don't remember who I voted for. I have the idea that I voted for Reagan, but I don't think I did.
I don't think you did.
No.
I don't think you did.
No.
No, because I
think it was John Anderson. There was a third party candidate running in 1980. Someone look up who it was. Whoever that was, I voted for. But I was not politicized in 1980. I didn't become politicized, meaning like I didn't start to really begin to break the world down until probably 1983, 82, 83. I was about 23 years old starting graduate school. So
another one. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and for the record, since I'm sitting here too, I have voted for Republicans, Democrats, and independents in the presidential arena. So I've voted for in all different ways throughout my lifetime.
The next one is a question that you've already answered, and I just wanted to reiterate the point. Is there going to be a quiz after class today? Sam mentioned that there was going to be a quiz.
Question?
Yes, of course there's a quiz after class. I already covered 3 questions. Yeah, but it's not going to start at 6:00 because Lily isn't around. Lily's stuck in traffic on Route 80, and I got to get the questions into. But we'll leave it open till this evening, so you can answer it at some point this evening. But now, since you're in the call, in class, you might as well just stay on. But yes, indeed, we'll put it up. Okay. Hey,
Another one.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a recount recount ordered in the Florida Supreme Court in the Bush-Gore election 2000. It took 7 days to complete. Will this happen again?
Dude, I don't know.
We were in Florida at that time, by the way.
We were in Florida. Yeah, you're right. We were right where it happened, where all hell broke loose in that very county.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I hope it's only that. I hope it's only if we don't know by tomorrow, I hope it's only 7 days, my friends. Man.
What makes you say that?
Because
besides just the fatigue of waiting, and
listen, man, this is the breakdown thing. Honestly, it's the breakdown piece here. You don't understand. Like, this is how it happens. It happens by the little pieces falling apart. And it's like some things work. Like you may think, hey, the system doesn't work. Hey, man, I can find you a system where things really don't work, and we really don't want to go there. We want to kind of be at a place where we, figuratively speaking, sit around saying like, oh, the system really doesn't work very well. But listen, it works pretty well. And and there's an immense amount of corruption, immense amount of inequality, all sorts of things happening, and yet at the base level, things function pretty well.
And that's just how, can I just emphasize that that's a really difficult statement to hold.
Especially as two white people here.
Yeah,
example,
but no matter who you are, where you stand, to realize that it works and it doesn't work. And this is sort of going back to what you were saying right in the beginning. And I was trying to push forward. Like everything's true that you could say about this election right now, just depending on where you're looking, because it's so massive, right? And so there are many ways, and our international students are saying this, by the way, all the time. Like, if you lived here, you would X, Y, or Z place. You'd understand, Americans, how well this works. But then at the same time, there's all the things that aren't working, and we'll forget about in COVID era, break all the kinds of things breaking down. But the point is, like, that there's a way in which both of those things are always true, and we're always challenged to be navigating the what's working and the what needs to work better, or what needs to actually just work.
For sure. Yeah.
So anyway, I just don't want to go past that, because it's too easy to say when it really is based on a really deep awareness.
Yeah, I have that. I'm with you on that. Okay, let me see here. It was in how similar I think.
Is this a question?
Yeah. Okay. This is from Haley, who's a current foundations facilitator. Wondering how you and I think the debates could have gone if they were structured like a wink dialogue.
Okay. The point of a debate is to win, and the point of a dialogue is to understand. And so we can't have understanding when it comes to politics, right? Because it's the winning that allows us to win. And so, yeah, it would go completely differently if we actually engaged in, quote, a debate, but that actually with the intention to understand and then build together. And that is absolutely 100% possible, to build with and understand better people, quote, on the other side. I do think there's a place for debate, because I think that there is a intellectual tension and discovery that can come, and that does come from that. Of course, not the way, quote, debates happen that we've seen recently. But anyway, that's just the distinction between winning and understanding can't be understated or overstated. Can't be overstated. So it's not the point. The point is to win, not to understand.
And the value of, go ahead.
No, but the fact that we don't ever see examples of dialogue and then actually greater understanding, and then people being able to build together, it leaves us in this position where we actually believe that that's not possible, and that all we can do is fight and then try to win, or lose, right? And it is not difficult to get people who are in a debate setting to actually communicate across those differences with each other and find things that they can build on together. They don't have to agree, but they can understand things that will expand each of them, or each of their perspectives, or each of their groups. And we just, the fact that we don't have examples of that, models of that, deep knowledge of that, again, is sad and dangerous, and keeps us believing that the only thing we can do is just live with the fact that there's a whole half of the population who we can't agree with. And that's it. We just segregate ourselves from each other.
Which is pretty
irrational.
Disturbing, really.
It's irrational.
No.
I mean,
well, listen. So if you could, the thing this, Jeff, can just really fast, can you just put that one slide up about guns? Just show this, just how many, the problem is, and I harp on this, but this is again coming as someone who studies war and breakdown at that level, the potential for violence when that happens, right? When people just.
But hang on, I know what you're saying.
Well, hang on, I just want to explain this graph about how just watching, when first off, Obama's election, we see the guns shoot up for certain groups, right? Sometimes it's Democrats buying guns, sometimes it's Republican-leaning people buying guns, whatever. But we see these spikes when there's a major shooting, and something big happens, and now we're seeing a spike, unprecedented of people who are buying guns, and that's the spike on the far right of this particular graph. And we've never seen anything like it. It's like 2.5 million guns being sold per month right now.
And yet I personally am not a fan of guns. And yet you have to also notice that with all of those guns, people are not out in the streets.
No,
I don't mean, and I'm not even talking about in relationship to this election or to the tensions, around this year. I'm just saying overall, people are really
sober,
but there's another word. Restrained is the word.
Yeah.
Restrained. It's really quite notable. So you know what I mean? It's like you can look at that. So I'm not disagreeing or undermining what you're saying about the way in which systems and nation states break down, because they do. Right? Nation states fail. We know this, right? And we are not immune from that. And at the same time, there's a great deal of steadiness and civilized quote behavior among most people most of the time, right? So we can't, we have to be aware and try to assess where we are. Obviously, that's what humans are doing all the time. Where are the dangers? But I think we also can get ourselves, and believe me, I worry about the level of combat and conformity that we see right now. At the same time, I think we can convince ourselves of some things that would be better for us to not actually see some of the restraint and soberness in people.
Well, no, we're going to see it right now. You're going to hear this. What you're going to turn, whether MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, or whatever it is that you're going to turn on, and you're going to see stories about these confrontations that happened at polling places and so on. But there are tens of thousands and thousands of polling places, tens of thousands across the United States, and in the vast majority of those places, it's just going to be business as usual all throughout the day and the evening. And
but the important point anyway is that it only takes one person or one group or one incident to create profound distrust and negativity and fear and whatever. And I'm not talking about anything in particular. I'm just saying one example of anything is it directs the way we think about a whole population of people, right? This is not new, but we swallow it every day and we believe it, even though we think we're better than that, right? And so what you're saying is, you're going to see these examples of such and such, and we're going to make in our minds this idea that it's bigger than it is. Sometimes it's bigger than we think, but I'm just saying it doesn't take a lot.
Matt Witch 89, asked the question, can we talk about the distrust that Americans have for the government? And I thought, my first thinking of that is like, well, but when you break that down about the distrust and about the various pieces, so if you actually ask the question about distrust, and clearly more Americans have a distrust of the government today than they did, 8 years ago, let's say, but most Americans, but certain Americans, when you start breaking it down, like there's certain segment of red America had far more distrust of the government 8 years ago under Obama than they do right now. So it's really a matter of which Americans we're talking about. But nonetheless, when we break it down into the pieces of that so-called government, we find that most Americans are pretty trusting of the different pieces of the government, right?
What do you mean?
Like the pieces of the government are going to continue to work, right? The IRS will work, that traffic lights will continue functioning. They're going to get electricity. They're going to get water. That people, when they pay their taxes, we're not going to, when they pay their taxes, the money's actually going to get to the government. It's not going to get into the pockets of individual politicians or postal workers or whatever. That most postal workers are going to deliver the mail as they're supposed to, and the ballots and so on, right? It's like, but what we do is we frame this stuff to sell headlines to people. It's clickbait, right?
Well, but I think so. But just to continue with that statement, I mean, I'm not. This is another one of those things where it's like there's so many dimensions of it, but on some level, when we know that political candidates their job is to get reelected, like what is there to trust about that, right? I mean, so in that, so I don't know what we're talking. So in terms of what you're talking about, like different services and things we expect tap water to be clean.
Well, this is what government is, though.
No, but that's not. But I don't know that. What I'm saying is, I think that maybe that statement your student is asking is more about government as the people.
No. I know that. I hear that. And what I'm saying is when we break it down to say, okay, well, you see, you're more distrustful now of government than you were 10 years ago. Like, okay, but how about this? I'm going to break government down into 20 different pieces of a pie.
I understood that.
And when I do all of those, you're like, well, okay, I kind of trust in that. And like, oh, I trust in that. And then you get to the end, you're like, well, actually, I guess I'm pretty trusting of government and whatever. Because I don't stop and think about what is government.
Right. No, but, and what I'm just building on that and saying, so I think that statement is more about the people, the politicians.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what I'm just adding is that why should we trust people who are telling us things that they think we need to know? And then we don't really see what they're doing except when it's problematic, which is often.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, it doesn't seem like...
No, it's not actually often. Most of the time, it's really government.
To go back to your point, yeah.
Governing is very boring. It's really boring business.
That takes us somewhere else. What you were, I thought, saying was that there's a lot of things that wind up working, right? That in World in Conversation, we're talking about the public good all semester, right? Yeah. So there's so many dimensions of things that are working, if that is what we're thinking of as the government, right? So, but I do think we maybe are thinking of governing, and that's like the people, and then what are their interests, and what are they actually selling away from us? And anyway, so I think that's a fair, I don't know. I mean, it's not really a direct.
Well, no, but the other side is like, this is what we keep forgetting, right? Like whatever, when I say like, oh, I don't trust this current government, right? Well, 5 years ago when the other party was in power, another group of people, they were saying, oh, I don't trust the current government. So like it's always important to realize no matter what it is, like, so someone asked a question, the snore louder, this person says, will my reproductive rights be taken away like in Poland, right? And so I have a statement to that. My first statement is no, because we're not going in that direction. Just, it's not, your reproductive rights are not going to be, first off, what does that mean in the first place, right? And
so wait, you're just saying that the U.S. is not going in the direction of Poland. That's all you're
saying.
We're
not going to. I don't think we're going to go there, because the life, dude. If we go there, if we go to that level where the Old Testament is going to be like kind of running the show here, i.e. Sharia law for Christianity, we got bigger problems we got some serious problems.
Well, we have serious problems.
Yeah. Okay.
So wait, but all you're saying is that your sense is that that's your prediction, but based on what?
Based on there's a process of sort of secular rational thought that is shaping modernity, that is shaping the more developed world and the post-industrial world and modernity as we see it. That is not going away. We have moved away from tradition. We have moved away from very strict traditional interpretations of theologies that were written years ago, many millennia ago, centuries ago. We've moved away from that, and so there are some people
all around the world.
The modern post-industrial secular rational legal world, and this is we are just not going to go backwards in that way. It's no longer going to be, gay rights are here. Trans rights, bi rights, they are here to stay everywhere in the world, and there are a few countries in the world that are hanging on, but we are never going backwards, and I think that's true with the power that women have to make determinations about their own bodies. This is a movement forward, and not hanging out forward as in progress. It is the movement of history. We are in that space, and so at the same time, I want to say this is just one of those things, right? No matter what. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's my response. Is that it's just like racism is a dead ideology. You cannot. Like, we're seeing the reemergence of racism, in different places around the world, but it's a dying ideology. It does not have deep roots going into the future. You cannot build a political party, a system, an ideology, a theology at all around classical racist thinking. It doesn't work. It's not going to develop firm, deep roots.
That might be an example of a radical thought on your part compared to what we're seeing and things that are emerging.
But what we're seeing are...
So your sense, though, is that those are not... well, you said they don't have deep tap roots, even though they may be emerging. You don't think that that history, world history, is going to see that hold? You think it's...
Yeah, world history is going toward a complex, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multinational identity that doesn't have a lot to do, has very little to do with our genetics. And that's where we're going to be. Now, there are going to be other reasons why maybe certain groups of people are held down, but no, that it's a dead ideology. You can't build anything on it. Okay, what do we have? I don't have any more. Well, here's actually, okay.
What does a non-peaceful transition of power look like to you?
It looks like the militia groups, that it looks like we have a non-peaceful transition of power. Hey, can I just say this, that what I think could possibly happen, that it would look, here's an example of it, right?
Here's an example of a
non-peaceful transition of power. So Trump loses.
Okay, I was going to ask you to give it from another, like a historical example, but go ahead.
No, this would be a candidate loses but is unwilling to cede the election, and they kind of whip up some kind of hysteria among their followers. This is just classic, right? We see it all over the world where this has happened. They whip up some kind of hysteria among their followers. Their followers start taking upon themselves to take charge because they have this belief that nobody else is going to take charge and their person is being treated unfairly. And then the hysteria just like flies through like wildfire into all these groups. And then it's just, then the violence starts. Now, I use that example because it's much more problematic. It's much more difficult for an outside entity. So like Biden to say like, hey, I barely lost, I lost the election, but barely. I think there's like some kind of there's been some kind of illegal activity happening here. So I'm going to try to whip up my followers to do something. That's much less likely. Not because, because Democrats probably own less guns, but nonetheless, that's just not, that will work itself out in the courts. But that's not about a peaceful transition of power.
The thing that's so striking about
Mm-hmm.
that, and that again, not as just your imagination of what's possible
Mm-hmm.
here, but just knowing that how these things happen throughout history and all over the world, etc. But it for me, that what is heartbreaking about it is that the people, the citizens, which are most of the population, have so much more reason to find ways to work together, to build together, to live together, et cetera, than they do to do violence against each other. It will never serve the citizens to rise up against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And
Never.
so it will only serve the most powerful. And I don't know how to say with as much passion as I feel it, that we have every reason to not humiliate people on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
to not
Mm-hmm.
goad people,
Mm-hmm.
to be respectful of whatever happens, not because we are impotent, or because we're being used, or we're traitors to our causes, but because nothing can be built if people are burning it, or just forget about burning it down, but just like doing violence to one another, because then that just that just builds on itself.
Well, nothing can be built, and at the same time, this isn't like, you get all these militia groups from lots of different perspectives, right? Lots of different, on the right, on the left, who are, kind of going out in the streets with their guns like it's a big game. It's not a game. Wait till the
no, but wait, hang on. I just think, I think that I don't want to just point to one or any specific groups of people that, because
so you're not talking about just militias.
I'm not at all.
I hear that, but hang
on. Okay. Because I'm not talking about even just like the current, what's happening in the United States, because we're not there at this moment, right?
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that if you look at the world and you look over time, the people never win when they go to war with each other. The people. And so if I could implant anything in us, it would be that we, the people, would recognize that it matters more that we don't do violence to one another than it does that our candidate wins or loses, because we will always lose when we go to war with each other.
Agreed. I'm going to leave it. We will always lose when we go to war. I just want to point out that I am typing that right now. Hey, Jeff.
And while you're typing that, I will say, and I'm not saying that war with guns is the only kind of war. I think there's, oppression and inequities of all kinds are their own kind of war. Public health issues that we have are a different kind of war. So, and I mean it. I mean, for me, war is all of those things. But in this moment, I'm specifically talking about violence that could come based on one candidate winning or losing.
Yeah, I agree.
None of us will win.
Well, someone asked, Never Stop 331 asks, what do we think about the fact that cities are boarding up for the election, expecting riots and looting? Expecting riots and looting, it's anticipating the possibility of riots and looting. This is what we're talking about here, And by the way, we say cities. People talk about cities because sociologically speaking, it's where large populations of people live. And so, they don't riot in the country, in rural Pennsylvania. Of course they don't. Nobody riots in rural. What are you going to riot out in the cow pasture? I mean, it doesn't.
Well, no, but it's not. But it's like in state college, right? When we have these things that happen after football games.
They happen in Beaver Canyon,
of course, where there's most of the people.
Where lots of people, they just walk out of their apartments, and everybody walks out of the apartments, and they look around and say, "Oh my God, there's suddenly 5,000 people standing here," because there are 5,000 people living in the apartments.
Right.
They don't riot on the other side where the other student apartments are. It happens in the exact same place every single time.
And by the way, just a bunch of people standing in Beaver Canyon isn't a riot.
Yeah, that's true.
Very quickly, when there's a lot of people in a small space, things happen that then can catch fire, right? That's what happens with people. It's not. So anyway, just to say, we're not equating those two things. But anyway, you're making that point that cities just have that quote reputation just only because there's lots of people in a smaller space.
Yeah. Okay. So one final thing, I want to end this with something here that I actually think is kind of significant, if I could say.
I hope it's good news. Or something hopeful.
All right.
No. I'm just.
Listen. Okay, here we go.
Wait, so it wasn't going to be something hopeful, or?
No. Okay, it will be, because we only have a couple minutes left. We can stay on, by the way, if people want to stay on. I mean, I can't put the quiz together right away. I'm going to need, 15 minutes. Do you think is voting is a right or a responsibility?
Me? Are you asking me that question?
Yeah. Someone's asking that.
I like that question. That's a really good question that deserves a lot of thought and conversation.
Yeah.
That would be kind of a cool conversation for the groups. I think it is both, and it can be neither, actually, just depending on what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to think it was a right, although human rights are a really tricky conversation to have about what are really our rights. But so I don't know. It takes me down a lot of pathways, but that's where I go first. I'd like it to be a right.
I I would like it actually to be a responsibility in the sense that I feel that in the good society, if I were king, if I were king, God forbid, and the good society that I would hope that I could create would be one in which people were relatively educated, thoughtful, and willing to see, and able to see the value of being educated and thoughtful. And one of the problems we have in our given system as it stands, people say, "Oh, it's the best system there is." Well, first off, it's not the best system there is, and because there are hundreds of systems out there, and like the people that say that are never the people who have studied all the other systems. So like it's not the best one that there is. Just like the United States isn't the greatest country in the world. Travel around to at least 50 countries, maybe 75 before you say that. But in any case, a system in which the vote of a person who knows absolutely nothing about the issues that are at play can cancel out the vote of someone who is deeply thoughtful and has studied the issues at play in a very, very serious way. The fact that one vote can cancel out the other vote seems to me to be a very ill and poorly constructed system. And so there's got to be certainly a better way for it.
So then where does responsibility fit in?
Because then the responsibility would be I don't really know. This is why it's far above my pay grade, but the responsibility of people you can't vote if you don't have a basic understanding of what the issues are, right? I mean, but I don't know how you leverage that. I don't know what you do with that, but for me, it certainly is increasingly problematic. So what happens is the people who are seeking the votes, but all we're doing is buying votes of the people in the middle who are extremely uneducated about the issues.
And let's just say uneducated doesn't mean go to college.
No, it doesn't mean go to college. It means thoughtful, having at least spent a modicum of a few moments studying what's happening. Right? It's like the Charlie Brown adults in the Charlie Brown cartoons. They sort of go this way, or they go this way, or they go here, or they go here, and that's what everybody's fighting over, are those people who can be swayed with emotion and so on. So anyway, that would be my final thought. Hey, y'all, let me say, I will continue to be hopeful, thoughtful, and in all likelihood, things are going to go very smoothly, because that's what happens. Has happened, and it's what happens in most places in the world, most of the time. Most elections, whatever they might be, and transfers of power throughout history are mostly pretty peaceful, and that's what we're talking about, is transfer of power. So I'm going to hold that down and assume that that's going to be the case. Dr. Mulvey, we could, if people want to stay on, they can stay on, but listen, y'all, I'm going to need probably I don't know, just a bit of time to put the quiz together, and I'll send an email out saying like, hey, the quiz is up, and I'll leave it up until, how about 11 o'clock tonight? I'll leave it up till 11 o'clock. How's that? And then you won't be, if you can take it anytime, you won't be marked late.
And I don't think we mentioned too many times on the stream, but your second reading quiz closes on the Thursday night. So do not forget, go to social19.org. On the top left, you can find the readings. Click reading number 2. Make sure you have your New York Times, all that good stuff.
Wait, one final thing too, class. Lori Mulvey, can you do a pitch for facilitators? People applying to be facilitators. This is, hold on, peeps.
Use exclamation point tryouts.
Tryouts.
Yep.
Yeah. Wait, Jeff, say that again.
Try it. Just don't worry.
Okay,
tryouts.
don't say that.
Yeah.
Learning to develop the mindset and the skills of a facilitator is life-changing. It will give you a better opportunity at every level and every vocation that you could imagine. And you will learn in like the most direct ways, and with a team of people from all around the US and all around the world, really. And it's the best learning experience I can imagine at Penn State.
Well, now I will agree with that, by the way. All right, y'all. Hey, if anybody, I can stay on another 15 minutes, so we can just, Lori, Lynn, I think you're probably done.
I am done.
I'll stay on
It's been
another
fun.
15 minutes, but you can just hop off and I'll sit here and kind of work on the quiz, and then I'll work on, but I'll stay on if anybody wants to continue to ask some questions. So how about that?
Can I just ask how you're going to write a quiz and answer questions?
See, I multitask okay,
let's pause it right
the
there.
Best of them.
Pause it right there.
I have to go vote soon. So
Jeff has to
for
vote
15 minutes. Maybe we can be live for another 5 minutes.
All right, 5 minutes. Does anybody else have any?
6.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else have any question they want to kick out?
Here, I'll turn my camera on so it's not just you. Hold on 1 second, chat.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hi, chat. Everybody.
I think we are.
What's a reasonable path for a third party to be relevant? I would say for the most part, if you want your party to be relevant, you got to get a lot of votes, but that's the important part. So you haven't ever seen my mouth because I've always had a mask on.
Oh yeah, you're in there by yourself. There you are.
All by myself.
That's funny.
Yeah, they kicked me out of the office today. That's rude, but okay.
Hey, does anybody have any other questions they want to kick out, or are we?
Who do you honestly think will win the election?
Biden's going to win, I think. Yeah. I do. I think he's going to win.
I probably agree with that. Yeah, I mostly agree. There's a big chance because I think like everyone's saying Pennsylvania is the important state, the most important state, and I think that we definitely will decide which side the country will be on. But Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are really the top 3. So I think those are going to be the ones that we have to wait and see. It's totally going to be close. United Man's definitely right. Does anybody have another question?
Yeah, because we can.
Do I think democracy is cringe? I think all government is cringe.
Trump's going to win PA by a landslide. I don't think that. Yeah.
I would say that's true if he didn't have the fracking issues that he is currently having, where in the past he said he would ban it, and so all of the labor unions in the western part of the state said not vote for anybody. So I don't know, man. I literally think any 50-50, it's going to come down to a few thousand votes, I think, in PA.
Will whoever is suggested to win tonight basically be the actual winner in a week or two? Yeah, I don't know, man. Dude, I'm holding my breath on that. You know what I mean?
Do you think that is possible for Trump to lose Texas?
I don't know. I don't know anything about particular states. I don't really pay attention to this stuff. I really try to pay attention to.
I don't think so. I think it's going to be close.
Yeah.
But I don't think so.
Hey, Jeff. And Sam?
Yes, ma'am.
May I say a little something about Wink?
Yeah, go ahead.
In addition to what Lori said, it also popped into my mind to share this, which is if you make it, you'll end up being a part of a community that is pretty freaking awesome from what I hear from students. Like any community, issues do come up, but the beautiful thing is that we work them out together in a restorative justice type of way and not a punitive way, which means when quote unquote mistakes happen, they can bring us closer together versus separating us, and we can grow together as humans. So if you want to grow as a human being, that's another reason that I'd join And I was a facilitator in the past, and I've worked with facilitators for years and have had really great transformative experiences, even as a staff member. So throwing that out there for everybody to think about.
Yeah, we really do need we want to just keep this going. We'll come back to it on Thursday. Thanks for saying that. It really is an awesome experience, I think.
Yeah.
People don't. 400, is it a 400 level class? The first level of facilitation is not a 400 level. The second one, if you move up to advanced facilitation, is a 400 level class. Poll tests, man. Yeah, no, you can't have poll tests. I know, like, this is the problem. That's why that what I said is just it's a deep hole to get into, but I don't know. Social 19N is just like Social 19, but it's the new whatever they call it. I forget what that N designation is, but it's the new Gen Ed designation. So it counts for many more things.
How many credits and how do we get graded for 297 and 400?
Yeah, it's 4 credits.
I think for the most part, it's 4 credits, I believe, right?
4 credits, and you get graded by showing up. And if you show up and do your thing, almost everybody gets an A. We want you to get an A. We need you to get an A. So, like, it's a 4 credit A, because if you don't get an A, it's a problem for us. So we just keep working with you to make sure that you get an A. Yeah.
And it's very flexible.
Hey, by the way, spend nutting. I like that comment. Yeah, it's common sense that you're going to lose a state where you promote destroying the local economy, man. That is absolutely common sense. Yeah, this is the problem. This is the problem that Biden is in, really. So, what are you going to do, right? It's so bored. The dark sense of foreboding. I try not to have that, but I'm working at not having that. I've been working really hard. I don't know, man.
Where do you think the riots are going to be the worst? Washington, D.C.
Nah, I don't think we're going to. Yeah, man, I'm not going to say that. I was going to say, we're not going to see riots. I'm not going to say that.
I think regardless of who wins, we will.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Jen, so
can we hold that perhaps we'll hold on to peace?
So
maybe
listen, man. Go ahead.
Maybe the more of us who choose peace, at least in our brains, will at least not contribute to any additional, like, inciting other people to be like, they said it was going to happen, so let's just do it. Like, let's do and hold perhaps what we want to see happen.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's.
What do you say
just best we can.
Those who hold peace but then get tried.
Wait, hang on 1 second. United, man. You can get Gen Ed, like U.S. culture and international cultures. If you're taking 119 right now, if you go to your advisor and say, listen, 119 right now is the same as it is next semester, can I get Social 19 and credit? You probably can. I just sent an email out to people saying, hey, let's go. Yeah, you're not going to see any. Go ahead. What was that, Joy?
I was saying, because in my mind, I was like, oh, choose peace. Well, I was thinking of like that rule of you kind of just don't retaliate until something is done to you, which is different. Like Jamie is saying, don't be that person that goes out and incites stuff. But what if you are, I don't know, maybe wrong place, wrong time, where if something comes towards you, how is one or a group or a community to react or respond?
Well, this is the nonviolent reality, right? I mean, that we would not have, the civil rights movement in the United States would not have occurred in any way the way that it did had the leaders of that movement not chosen nonviolence. and nonviolence is an ancient tradition, and to not even respond. There are very select ways in which people even respond back harshly when violence has been committed against them. And so it takes a lot. It takes a lot of willpower. It takes an immense amount of understanding. It takes an immense amount of restraint to hold the nonviolent stance in the face of violence. But people do it, and mostly it requires human beings to do a lot of inner work to be able to hold that. In the civil rights movement, everybody who was sent out to engage in nonviolent protest was trained. Went through a great deal of training to strengthen the restraint muscle in themselves, so that when people responded responded to them in a violent way, that they were able to not respond back with equal or any kind of violence. It takes a lot. So it doesn't just happen. So when people say, "Oh, I can never respond that way," well, you could, if you went through the training and understood the philosophy and the logic behind it, and the sociological power behind nonviolent response. You could do it. Everybody could do it. And most people would do it, but we just don't get that kind of training because most people aren't in the position where that becomes important.
All right. My ride is here. I have to go.
Dude, yeah, you got to go. All right,
everybody. We will be live on Thursday. And Sam, let's try and do an interstices this week because there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm going to do one.
Yeah,
I'm going to do one tomorrow. So I'll send something out.
Cool. If you have a World in Conversation dialogue tomorrow, check your email. They've been rescheduled. If you have any questions, look at your email first and then reach out.
And don't forget to vote, people.
Go vote.
Yeah, dude, go vote. Enjoy it, man. Hope you don't stand in line all night.
I hope not.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.